What if all the mess that you need to clean up before getting started is just your excuse for never starting? And what if you're keeping all of that mess around you like the perfect shield to shield you from ever having to put up or shut up? Yep, I'm talking to you. But whether all of that's happening or you're just genuinely being a little bit too obsessive, it really doesn't matter. What does is you getting about to taking that first imperfect step. Because if you're waiting for that perfect moment to start something, it may just never come. Today we're talking about why starting messy and taking the first imperfect step is an important key to making progress and moving towards your goal. Whether you're launching a business, pursuing a passion, or trying something new, waiting for the perfect time could be exactly what's holding you back. I've learned this firsthand in my pursuits as a songwriter, as a musician, and as a burgeoning content creator. I'm at the beginning of a mission to write and publish 100 songs. All that while learning to build a platform online to connect with others who may have the same kind of interests. My early steps were not perfect. In fact, they were far from it. But they taught me that momentum is the currency of choice. Far better to gain some and learn along the way than it is to stay stagnant. Today we'll lean into embracing wherever it is we are in our progress, in our endeavor, grabbing a hold of all of that and taking distinct steps towards action. My channel isn't a long time in the coming, and as of yet it isn't exactly quite what I had imagined it to be. Nonetheless, inevitably, my own procrastination, based on my own desire to get things positioned as well as possible before I presented it to people, what ended up happening is that I spent the better part of 10 years organizing every facet of what I needed to do to build a studio, and I'll be happy to share some of the big mistakes that I made with you. You know, I've read a lot of smart stuff, and one of the things that I've read recently, it said a lot of people may tend to avoid mistakes rather than embrace growth. If you think about that, that might be how you've gotten yourself into the situation you're in. And that's certainly how I did. In the moment, I never thought of it so distinctly. But in reflection, it's clear when you're doing something and you're putting yourself out there, it's natural to have a certain amount of fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being ready. And all of that can keep people from getting started. On some occasions, perfectionism, it can be a tool. It is what helped me to separate myself when it comes to music. But on the other hand, it can also be a barrier because it is a focus on avoiding mistakes. When you're starting out, it's kind of like a baby. And if you think about a baby when they're trying to walk for the first time, certain you and I both have had this experience before. When you're a baby and you're first starting to walk, the baby falls repeatedly, but the baby never waits to perfect the skill before trying it. They just drive into it. They don't care. They're not concerned with who's looking down at them. They're just taking the necessary next step. And if we can apply a little bit of that tenacity or a little bit of that moxie to whatever it is we're doing, it's certainly going to be of value to do it. When I decided to start my channel, I thought that the best course of action was to build a recording studio to shoot an ongoing story from. So I spent years acquiring gear. I spent years learning all about cameras and buying cameras, putting together all of the pieces that I thought someone who had a very nice channel would have. My thinking was all about presentation. I'd given over to the idea that you only have one chance to make first impression. My logic was such that by presenting myself in an established way would lend me perceived authority in a niche. And there may be truth to that logic, but the gamble didn't pay off at all. And as a songwriter, I hadn't spent much time with mixing and engineering records for myself, so I was not confident that I would be able to do it. And those two factors are what led to me making the decision to do the rollout the way I did. Little did I know at the time, it was that decision that really made matters worse. I'm not a big person for regret. I try not to regret things. I try to think that there's a purpose in things. But if you want to talk about progress, had I chosen to just turn the camera on then and document everything, I would have avoided the things that came next. But before we get to that, it would have served me better to have been documenting everything along the way. Because at the end of the day, when you're taking some action, even if it's small, you're building a momentum. As I mentioned earlier, it's that momentum that is the currency of progress. When you start messy, you get to learn from real world experience. There can be a lot more takeaways from that than overthinking and overplanning. Rather than thinking about it as an effort of like displaying some finished product, think about your effort as showcasing the progress. Something like a sculptor. If we want to watch an artisan shaping a lump of clay into something beautiful. Lean into the fact that that effort to shape the clay is the thing of interest, because anyone starting anything starts from somewhere. Few people have the luxury of building a masterpiece from a masterpiece. It all comes down to the fear of being judged. I don't care how you try to tell yourself that's not the case. It's the truth. And I hate seeing it in myself, but I see it. I want to control the outcomes like a magician, and I want to revel in the awe and specter that I create in doing so. And that is precisely the thinking that caused me to go about building my channel in a way that I did. Spending all the time to collect everything and making sure everything was perfect. Building a studio, having every kind of gear that I could want, both video and audio. Before I ever hit record, an investment of time to that point that I can never get back. Only to finally have everything acquired, have a studio built out, a vocal booth, beautiful aesthetics in the entire place. Looks great on camera. Everything about my intention was exactly met. Everything I set out to do, I did. Casey Neistat had a program online where he took apart his way of shooting YouTube videos, and I joined that. We were put into a group of people, and we had to make 2 videos and share them with the group for critique. And the first video I did turned out great. Everybody in the group was like, wow, you must have been doing this a long time, this kind of thing. And I hadn't. It was the first video that I'd ever made. Went over without a hitch. And then between the first video and the second video, I get a call from the landlord where I had the music studio, and they had decided that they were gonna do something else with the property, and that was that. I had no preparations made to protect me, and I didn't have any recourse. But that wasn't the worst of it. What made matters worse was that I was still so locked in on that idea of the presentation and leading with this air of excellence that I was left devastated by having the circumstance that I built for myself vacated. And because I hadn't been practicing anything near the idea of living abundantly and living in growth, couldn't even remotely picture the path out of it. And I certainly wasn't about to document that. And without being too self-serving, I'll just say that it didn't end there. It kept going, and I burned another 2 years before my thinking finally realigned, and before I got to the point where I realized that it was like a now or never. Track everything, show whatever, show the progress from here, show the progress getting up. I wasn't down on just YouTube at that point. I was down on the music, my new location. I didn't have any of the accoutrements that I had just provided to myself. And because I had trained myself to be like this and to think like this, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do anything with what I had. It's ridiculous in hindsight. But finally, I reached the end of the line of it, and I had some real challenging conversations with my father. And when I was as far as I wanted to go into depression, I finally flipped the switch and just went in and started to make songs. A few months later, I posted one up, and here we are now, almost a year later, and I'm only now trying to get a handle on getting it together with building the channel. The big takeaway for me is I have to say this in the most honest way that I can. I want to be clear that I'm not trying to make an excuse for myself. I'd have been most certainly better off had I been just documenting whatever I was doing without attempting to put on an air or present something in a perfect way, or to think that that was how you had to do it. But at the same time, I wasn't wired to do it any other way than exactly how I did it. If you were anything like me and you're suffering from that same sort of tunnel vision that I was, then I'm hoping that this can be some kind of a use to you. We all are on a limited budget of time. None of us have any of it to waste. So whatever it is that you're doing, whatever project that you're working on, whatever's important to you, you owe it to yourself to get to the doing of it, and see to it that you can put that to rest for yourself. Figure out where it was going to go, if it would have legs. Like my father told me, you don't want to get any farther down the road and be having the same questions in your mind. So you might as well get to the action right now while there's still time for it. Small, consistent actions lead to significant progress. And the real magic, it's not an illusion. It's not preparing a presentation that amazes. The real magic is in the process of refining and building and improving on all of the messy first steps. So take one small step towards your goal, no matter how imperfect it feels. Don't worry about a flawless execution, and celebrate the small wins. Don't be afraid to learn as you go, and don't be embarrassed that someone saw you learn something. Then take each of those experiences and use them as foundation for the next step. As I've mentioned, working towards the things that I'm trying to have led me a great deal of setbacks, but at the same time, at the end of the day, I don't have a real interest in wallowing in those. I intend on making something out of them. I have to make more out of less time now. So you keep your head up, and I'm gonna keep mine up. If you're interested in following along and see what I have going on, you know what to do. If you haven't heard my new song, you can listen to it here. Keep yourself well. We'll talk again soon.